at Ground Truth. Welcome to the stage, John and Mark.
Thanks,
Thank you for having us.
And Mark, I don't know about you, but it almost felt like yielding our time back. That was an outstanding presentation that I think as we cross over now into CPG and consumer engagement, it's just it's a flow. I hope we can continue the excitement.
Yes, absolutely. And there's definitely a lot of change happening in the connected TV space. And thanks to the previous panel for sharing all that. So we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the world of consumer engagement, and specifically in the CPG marketing world. John, do you want to just start by introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your role at Jack Links?
Yeah, and Pearl gave a little bit of an introduction, but again, my name is John Ostman. I'm the Senior Director of E-commerce and Digital Strategy for Jack Links and the Link Snacks family of brands. I've been with the company here for about a year and a half, and it's an exciting place to be. I could tell you that people know the flagship of Jack Links typically in Sasquatch, and people typically go to the Messin' with Sasquatch commercials. He might be hiding out behind me somewhere here. But we're really on the path. We're a global company. We operate in 11 different countries, 4,400 team members. And it's really the story of snacking, protein snacking, and how the product has made its way into really a lifestyle and different usage occasions from that perspective. Prior to being with Jack Links, though, I led in a really similar role for the Hallmark Cards organization. And I've been in digital and e-commerce for a lot of years, 18 years at this point. A lot of experience across the industry, but now really moving more towards omni-channel. I also lead the Minnesota Interactive Marketing Association here in the Midwest, at the group focused on bringing consumers, agencies, brands together as well. My role here is a little bit unique in that I sit outside of brand teams and really we're enablement, e-commerce and direct consumer, pure play. The sales side is with my team, the digital marketing side, the consumer engagement side, retailer media is with my team, social media and PR, influencer is within the purview. So it's really a fun place, both from the company side and from the team aspect, from who I get to work with on a daily basis here. And we're going to dive into a lot of those topics today.
Well, thank you. Yes, there's a lot under your purview for sure. And we're happy to have your perspective as you're looking at a lot of different things, from, social influencer all the way to, e-commerce platforms, direct to consumer. So a little bit about myself, just for those watching, I'm the SVP of and head of partnerships at Ground Truth, which is a location-based advertising solution. We serve location-based ads across all screens, mobile, desktop, and CTV as well. So I was actually getting a lot out of the previous conversation as we recently launched a CTV solution. But let's dive in a little bit to consumer engagement. And my first question is that consumer engagement can mean different things to different companies. And I think it can look different in terms of how you define success if you're selling protein snacks versus if you're trying to sell luxury auto or something like that. So how do you guys think about what successful engagement looks like for your brands?
Yeah, and I think as we dive into that, and we'll talk about our definition, but I clearly have a little bit of a digital tendency towards where I operate in my understanding of the consumer. But I think of over the last year for sure of just who we've all seen from consumer behavior and where the consumer has moved to. And that experience is there's probably not as much of a difference anymore of how the consumer starts with us, right? And we know that for probably the past 5 years, people really start to engage with brands in digital spaces and in digital places, right? So I'm looking for a new automobile, or I'm considering new automobiles, Mercedes, BMW, right, as luxury brands. You're probably influenced by your peers, your friends, your family. And so you start that pre-shop or that awareness in a different place. And it's the same, I think, for, we're talking about protein snacks, meat snacks, or chips and nuts and seeds. I mean, right, the consumer experience really has shifted even from before they get to our brands. So then you really start to think about measurement and success from that consumer and customer experience, meaning something a little bit different of what is a consumer's experience and touch points with us and what are they learning about us before they know who we are, to when they know who we are, when they purchase and how they purchase after. So success really is defined very broadly, especially if you think about CPG and household penetration, very classic traditional metrics. But you start to layer on then some more of the digital of loyalty and how many times they purchase with us. So those are the things that I think our team is really starting to think about with the consumer experience of not only do we understand that consumer where they are, what that experience is, but where are they now really being influenced? Are they enjoying the process of interacting with our brands? So, and again, I think the output tends to get very different than as you think about what product or service you're selling. But I think the path really does start to mirror, especially as marketers, of how we engage with and how we measure.
Yeah, for sure. Regardless of what you're selling, the journey seems to start first in digital, and why it's really important to have a strong presence across all the different ways in which consumers could engage with your brand in a digital world. And you sort of opened with this, but Jack Link's and some of your products have such a strong identity, and you seem to obviously know your core audiences really well. But I'm curious if there's been any, sort of things that have surprised you in terms of the types of consumers that have been engaging with your brands and how that may have changed, especially in the last year with the pandemic.
Yeah, and it's a really fun question to answer, right? Because I think, especially as we dive into the house of brands more of where we are and the stories that we kind of get into with each one of those, if you know who Jack Link's is, and again, if you know Sasquatch, and I see some questions and comments already coming around the commercials that people really do have that identity that they sort of know us, and you would think of Jack Link's really as that road trip snack, right? Or we hear really commonly that the first experience with the product is I was going fishing with my grandpa and he had that in the boat, right? Or you hear a lot of those stories, and even as we join the company as marketers in the company, that's that common story. But where we started that evolution moving towards was really about, hey, the desire from the company is making us more of an everyday snack, making us putting us into the set of a better for you type snack as well. It's a protein snack at the end of the day. It's in a lot of cases 100% beef, right? So we get outside of that salty and other place. So we had wanted to move to that space, and then I think what we saw, especially with pandemic and COVID, when people started to pantry load, is it created a lot of real new behaviors. And with that influx of new consumer, we really started to dive in, thinking about, wow, how are people using this product now, right? They might have put it in their pantry just because they were going to the store to load up, pantry load. They might be going, buying online and having a different experience with us. But now those behaviors are created, and we were really seeing that come to life in that this does fit into my life in a different way. And I think if we dive into Larissa's Kitchen as an example of one of our other brands that's really focused on her and mom and fueling the professional woman and her kids and family, that puts another layer on of who is using this product in a different way. And I don't think that you would think of meat snacks as traditionally a family snack too, right? Now we're seeing those stories from the consumer come to life. I'll tell you from my personal experience, and my wife and I've got a preschool and a second grader, I brought this product into her house because I work for the company, right? I like the product. But all of a sudden, when my preschooler goes to school, his snack becomes our smaller little stick, and it would not have been considered before. And all of a sudden, it's just becoming a part of our life. And we are really seeing that adoption. So I think, again, aspirationally, as brands, we wanted to move that way with the consumer. Pandemic certainly, like it had done with e-commerce, a lot of things just really expedited that. And we're hearing stories from real life usage, and we're able to sort of lean in as a brand and use those insights. And those insights really come not only from the customer experience then, but it really informs product and how we think about innovation too.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of product and innovation, one thing, on the topic of the pandemic and some of the changes in shopping behavior that we've seen from consumers, a lot of your brands, have traditionally been maybe more of an impulse brand, positioned near checkout, things like that. But as you start to expand into different maybe use cases and occasions and different types of consumers, how's that changed the way that you position your products maybe in a physical environment as well as maybe in a digital shelf type of environment?
Yeah, I think we kind of keep touching on it, but the movement of that consumer, and, you know, I think we in CPG and certainly in other segments too, we always want to be consumer led. And from that aspect, it was really easy to think about omni-channel, right? So what does it now look like if I'm going to do my grocery shopping with Walmart and I open up on my app to start my list, right? That really informs us that consumer behavior of then how we need to interact with that consumer and provide a different experience. And I think what we found is absolutely that consumer has shifted heavy online. Of course, I think we all expect that behavior is going to continue. The research is telling us that's going to continue. But as we move further into that and then trying to create these experiences and think about the digital shelf of now, not only do we mimic what we do in store online, but what are the additional value adds, product extensions that we can get into online and present to the consumer. There's still a lot of learning that's happening, and we continue to tie this back to the consumer experience of our expectation is we present this product like at Walmart on the app or through grocery online pickup or for Target, wherever that is. But we're still seeing the consumer really drive and say, I might start that online, I might buy online, I might pick up at the store, but I'm still going to run in to the front end, right? And so now we're being informed in really different ways from that consumer and how they're interacting of what now does that mean if they start their trip, they might buy us on their list, they might pick us up, and I forgot peaches, right? We're gonna make pie today, so I'm gonna run in and grab it. And so how does that inform what we put in the front of the store versus center of the store? Or as we think about in the cooler and convenience and grab and go, how do we bring that product to life now knowing we can do, 2-hour delivery from some stores? So it's a really unique, I think, perspective that we use with technology, analytics, and tools to understand that consumer a little bit more deeply.
Right. And, we talk about the journey starting online and perhaps even a conversion happening online, but still in store is, still, people are still going into stores, and that's ultimately where they're going to experience your brand physically in many ways. So how are you thinking about from an investment standpoint in terms of your investment to engage consumers from an online first or an online pickup and delivery first type of investment versus, sort of driving people to stores or more large, brand awareness type activities?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of commiserating among the CPGs and others that we're all probably saying the same things, and probably what I'm going to say is going to resonate broadly, but I think we know the role of shopper marketing is changing, right? Is with the old, we'll say quote unquote, because it's not the old way, we're still in this path, but we thought about reaching that consumer in aisle, IRCs, and we would do offers and coupons and things that had always been invested upon. The movement to clean stores now has certainly changed the way we think about offers and investing. The movements from into the digital side has really changed the way we think about it. And I think where brands are really struggling, and from our perspective where we struggle a little bit too, is that it's becoming table stakes that you have to have this online presence. And if you're not there, your share won't grow as fast. The questions around incrementality need to be answered. The question of channel shift needs to be answered. And it's sort of like in my team, we use this analogy a lot of, well, the trains are running, and we might need to remodel the train station and change the way of what the train station operates, how that operates. And so for us as a company, we are absolutely pushing the funding initiatives within digital and to try to think about digital first because of the shift. But I think the reality is, even as we think through the consumer, we're still not sure. We're still building the stories of what's the best way to interact with that consumer. Is it when you start a shopping list so that you're on the shopping list? Is it a restock function? If now we think about omni-channel of somebody shops online, picks up in the store, what does that connected experience look like? So we are not only funding media and leaning in media, we're funding the research and analytics, but it's a lot of test and learn, right? So again, this is becoming table stakes for companies, and it's for a lot of us that was probably on a roadmap for the 3-year look.
Mm-hmm.
And when we all had the events, if we want to start referring to it that way, happen, everyone just went, boy, we need to replan, rethink, and sort of learn now with the best data that we have in the stream.
I'm curious, because you oversee sort of all digital essentially, and inclusive of retailer media as well as sort of other media, social or whatever it might be. How are you thinking about how you leverage retailer media versus maybe other types of solutions to reach that consumer online?
Yeah, and again, this is.
And by the way, I did not prep you with that question. I just thought of it.
No,
We'll sorry to put you on the spot.
No, we'll take them all.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's an interesting perspective the way that we think about it, right? We still think in traditional brand equity, right, where we have to be out with the commercial, talking about the food and reaching people broadly. So linear TV, OTT, obviously the conversation before us here, for those who were dialed in on video, was really interesting because that's part of that shift too. And I think one of the last questions on that media was, hey, who do you partner with? Is it with a retailer? With the media? Is it through an Amazon who owns an OTT and Fire? And so we are broadly talking about that as a topic, but where we're now starting to layer on is intent-based of, apart from brand equity, how do we get closer to the consumer? And I think that's really where the conversation then happens of saying retailer media is really important because of the data. And the analogy here with Instacart in the conversation with people with Instacart is, what's the real value of Instacart? Is it with their delivery service itself and the ability to send shoppers in and pick product off the shelf and just the capability? I suspect that as Amazon has built capabilities that they merchandise, Instacart's doing that, and now post-pandemic, that's a real strength. But the shopper data absolutely is the one of the cores of that, right? So when you get down to 1P data, whether it's Walmart, Amazon, or whomever, we can meet that consumer in a very specific way. And not only can we use that data to reach them and understand them, but to think about what's compelling within that. So should we be using retailer media and or retailer 1P data to go out in social, because we understand the consumer a little bit differently in that space. So I think it's an evolving process for us as a company still, and I suspect for a lot of other brands, of it's the struggle and the duality of, we still need to put brand messages in place and fund those things, but now we have this additional lever and layer that puts gets us closer to the consumer in a purchase intent.
So something you just touched on, which is a hot topic for us, because at Ground Truth, we lean more heavily into the shopper marketing space, just given that we know where people shop. And so it's more of a hand in glove fit. But what you touched on was, knowing there's a lot of data that the retailers can provide you to help you understand the shopper, right? But that oftentimes isn't necessarily who the consumer is. How do you think about shopper versus consumer, and how do you sort of adapt your strategies, from a brand equity standpoint, which is likely focused more on the consumer versus the shopper strategy?
Yeah, I think they're really merging is the answer to that. I don't know if I have a really good answer to take you deep into that one. Again, the way I think we're thinking about shopper, it's really the triangle, right? You've got the shopper, you've got the customer who's the retailer, and then you've got the unified brand experience on top of that. And so we're sort of in that process of rethinking now, given the shift we've come through, turning shopper really into that customer marketing side, the full investment, turning that omni, because we know that consumer then has a very different relationship right now. And I know you didn't ask the question this way, but the struggle within that is, as we think from the marketing perspective of trying to meet the consumer and who they are, the real danger right now that we're navigating through is archetypes and personas and South by Southwest, Michelle McAllister, who's with PepsiCo, one of the lines that really stuck out with me is she said, you can't be led by one consumer and tell a full truth about a group of people within that, right? And so now if you start to layer on what you just asked around shopper, consumer, retailer, is we've got a much deeper now tool set and understanding of that consumer, but have we gotten so narrowly focused because of a shopper marketing program that we're really missing out on a chunk or a particular population or consumer set there?
Yeah, and that's something you touched on earlier, which has been maybe something that's a little surprising to you, is perhaps you wouldn't have realized it otherwise if you weren't paying attention, is that, there's likely a whole new customer segment that's just looking for a healthy protein snack that might not have been your traditional core that you had focused on, right?
Yeah.
And can you talk to us a little bit about how, when you see maybe a shift in adoption with a different type of consumer or shopper, and then bringing that to that insight to the retailer, how have they responded in terms of, how they're positioning your products on shelf to meet that maybe a new type of consumer?
Yeah, so I think just as a general rule, as a company, we everyone would say this, I'm sure, but we want to have those really close relationships with our customers. And you think about JBP, and we can throw all the buzzwords out, right? But this category has grown so quickly over the past few years and really the past year that our retail partners are really coming to us and asking, and not only at the shelf, right? I mean, I think this set, when you think about convenience, is a very small set that somebody might stand in front of, where now in grocery and other places, and even convenience, you're thinking about 4, 6, 8-foot sets, and the consumer goes and gravitates towards that product. And our retail partners are coming to us and saying, help us tell a story. I think we're blessed to be in the position with Link Snacks here that we own a majority of the share. We feel like we created the category, and from that perspective, then we understand the consumer the best. We can bring the data the best, and that means not only talking about us as a company, but recognizing what the usage occasions for other brands are. So for your retail perspective, telling the true category story, you do need to have regional brands, you do need to have private label, you do need to have these. The layer on top that we really hear the retailers coming to us, though, is it feels like, hey, you're more sophisticated or driving the space online as well. So how do we then think about meeting the consumer need in our digital spaces? What does that assortment really look like? How do we tell the story online to offline? How do we bring those unified experiences? Someone who's like a Kroger, who's very sophisticated in an e-commerce sense, they understand the mechanics and the operational. They need the information of what creates impulse, what items, what assortments, what's the usage occasion, what's the price point. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of success, bringing the full category story back to our retail partners there.
Touching on impulse for a second, because for the CPG people in the audience, some of them may represent a brand that's more of an impulse type brand, and some may represent a sort of an everyday milk or bread or something like that. So how do you think differently about some of your brands that might be more impulse versus some of your brands that may be more of an everyday snack solution, like the snacks for your kids and things like that?
Yeah, I think, again, the product really serves in a lot of those. And so it's what's our assortment look like to fit that need. And I don't think it's changed dramatically if you think about grocery and convenience channels, right? So I'm going to go fill up my car, and what is it that I might be looking for? The way we think about it a little bit more is protein and meat snacking really becomes accepted. Where are the spaces we get to fill in the blanks on? So Jack Link's, we have a cold crafted product, right? It's a beef stick and cheese together, or it's a sandwich. I'm sure you've seen where it's a piece of salami, cheese and salami sandwich. And so we're sort of thinking of impulse that way, and just usage occasion. I would say, again, if I were to summarize what we've been asked the most over the last year is, as the consumer then continues to transition to digital spaces, what does the digital impulse look like? And how do we present our items to the consumer in a way that feels like I'm already doing my shopping trip in the stream. What are the price points that really will inspire somebody to either try this product the first time, or, okay, yep, I just thought about, we're heading to the beach, right? And so I need that product. And so where are the mechanics across a website that we can put that messaging in front of people? What do we know about our consumer and what they expect to put impulse items? From the brand side, again, Jack Link's, people typically know who Jack Link's is in this space. Larissa's Kitchen, that really is cleaner label, no nitrates, an organic product. It's a little bit more of a thoughtful purchase then, right? So is it as much of an impulse? It might not be, but we believe the form and format, a beef stick or something, still fits into that construct. Golden Island, which is more of a specialty Asian flavor inspired, that you might find in Costco. Again, the impulse side of that really is pricing, and it's available in that channel. If you're a Costco shopper, I certainly am. We know what that feels like to walk through, and you walked in for one or two things, and you never leave without that full cart. I think the way we think about impulse in that place is we need to have the product there and available, and have it be a high quality product.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm getting some good questions in from the audience, and going to shift gears a little bit, and just hit you up with some questions here. So one question from the audience: what has been your most successful marketing program?
Can we pick just one of them?
Well, that's good news. Is that you're thinking of a lot of that?
Well, we're back to what do you define success as, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you, from successes around the test and learn right now, and back into our digital and offline spaces, and without diving too deep into details, of course, is to say the digital place where we thought maybe of only shopper marketing in the past, in impulse or even pulsed in programs. Always on, is, of course, is the buzzword right now. And so over the last year, one of the most successful programs has been, maybe not in terms of the volume of dollars, but proving out the case. And so we'll take one of the larger retails where click and collect, we wanted to move the needle on. And so what we had done was run a series of banner and display, along with always on sponsored product, with the goal to move that product in click and collect, in online direct ship to home. What we found in that program, and it's not a happy accident, and we'll talk a little bit more in just a moment about some of our industry research, but what we found out, not only did we meet a consumer need and demand where we had an unexpected halo of the brand, we advertised a very specific product. Consumers did buy the specific product, but they really haloed out into the brand at large. The additional measurement in place was we actually saw much more of the product sales happen in store than it happened at click and collect or online. So I don't know, I call it I said a happy accident. It probably was a happy accident, but it's why we do these test and learn programs. I'll reference a Path to Purchase study report that came out. They put out a really interesting report that I would say that we had a very similar experience, that they sought to say, hey, for your digital spend, what do you get back in store? And a few of their case studies, and you can go find this report, I'd encourage you actually to read it. What they found and they proved for one of the case studies was, for every dollar you spend in retailer media, they got $7 back at the shelf. And for a long time, we've struggled with this closed loop attribution to say, what's the value of your digital and online media? And I'll tell you, we saw a very similar story. And from that point, success to tell, as we think about funding and meeting the consumer in that space, was we had a lot of success in the baseline program of online advertising, inspiring purchase online. But the proof points of that media inspiring exponential growth in store was a big win for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that a lot of the clients we worked with, and we talked about this yesterday, are seeing some of those same things. There was a lot of, I'd say, kind of a rush when the pandemic happened to shift a lot of their dollars to funding click and collect efforts and wanting to get in people's digital baskets. But we've seen a lot of the same things, that even though that may be the main KPI of your program is to try to drive online conversions, we've seen a lot of success in those programs also driving in-store conversions. And I think it's about consumer choice at the end of the day. It's
Yes.
you want to give them the opportunity to click and collect and make it easy for them if they're ready to buy. But just because they might not be ready to buy in that moment doesn't mean that your brand might not be top of mind on that next trip that they take. So it's a really interesting insight for sure, and probably I guess encourages you to continue spending in the online world, even though you might be seeing the volume from in-store still in this day and age.
It does, and just as marketers too, the encouragement for me is as you start to test and learn in this area, again, it all comes back to the consumer. Is when you run programs like that, do you choose a partner where you have the most access into the data to learn something about your consumer and consumer groups, right? So if I have the call back to what I said about you can't be led by one person and expect to find a whole truth, it's how do we use this data then to understand that consumer much more broadly? Is it somebody who's shopping online? Were they inspired by something they saw on site, or was it social that pushed them into that stream? So we learn a lot about our consumer when we make those investments.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. Do you, next question from the audience is, do you see your consumer base growing and expanding over time? I know we touched on that a little bit, but what sort of spaces are you excited to get into, or where do you see the Jack Link's brand going?
Yeah, just at the highest level, we are much more than a road trip snack, right? So I think the spaces that we grow into are powering your family, breaking through hopefully with the message that and I think people have this expectation that beef jerky or beef sticks are really unhealthy, and when you really get into it, and we have this debate all the time on plant-based snacking and food.
Actually, the next question is about meatless products. So
well, so we'll talk about that in a moment then. But when you really get down to who we are, the spaces that we push into are, hey, this is really quality product, right? It is 100% beef. It is, even though it's a shelf stable product, you open that bag and you really should refrigerate it after a couple days because it's whole food. It's protein. It's about one of the purest forms of protein that you get into. And so we think about where that puts us into from a consumer perspective, and it's not just snacking. We do know that people use this product for meal replacement. That is a midday snack. It serves a different purpose in your life, and so we fit with nuts and seeds, where we may not quite be center of plate yet as you think about that, but post-workout snack, right? This opens up a lot of different space where we fit a consumer need, and not only we create consumer spaces as marketers sometimes, but there's this natural flow into places in our lives that a product fits, and when you come together in those places, it really feels good as marketers too, to be able to support that message. So those are some of the spaces that I think we feel like we're growing into.
So there's one question. Actually, let's touch on the meatless question, which is, do you feel pressure to expand your products to include more meatless options?
The answer is yes and no. Right now, what consumers have told us is that they do not think about meatless as a snacking option. Now, I think we're starting to see that shift a little bit, but people very much think about Incredible and some of the other brand names in meatless meat, right? I'm not in that industry, but they think consumers really think about it as center plate. So I'm gonna make a burger. I'm gonna make a something. I'm gonna get a veggie patty that's like a chicken patty, right? And so, do we feel pressure? No, not necessarily. But are we exploring it? Yes, right? It's a place that probably really does fit in. The consumers are moving that way. Larissa's Kitchen, we have what we call a homemade medley bar, and it's an egg white, it's fruits, it's nuts, it's seeds. There is a meat component there. So those spaces that we find that the consumers want us to be in. And yes, we very likely will continue to move into that space. But again, if we're going to be consumer led, the statistics say that 70% of consumers who consume meatless product or meatless proteins also have meat in their homes. So we're in that space where's the acceptance from the consumer, and what do they really want from us from a brand?
Yeah, so definitely a growing space as well. But um, so kind of shifting back to occasions, and we talked about new occasions that you're excited about where you're meeting a consumer need. But I'm going to ask you about a very traditional occasion that most people probably think of, which is sort of the road trip snack.
Mhm.
And the question is, have you made any adjustments to your marketing strategy related to more people road tripping and traveling domestically, or are you seeing an increase in that sort of occasion during this pandemic?
Yeah, and I think even as I talk to my peers in this industry, CPG and otherwise, I think we're all expecting that to happen, right? There's a lot of pent up demand, and we talk a lot about boats, RVs, recreational vehicles have been at all-time highs for sales, and if you're in a segment that serves or halos outside of that, yes, we expect that to happen. I think we continued to have a lot of our marketing in place even through the pandemic because again, people there was high demand for it. We wanted to make sure that people understood how we fit into their lives. But yes, I think you'll continue to see us, like many other brands, come out in support of or remind people to be top of mind um, as you go back and get into road trips, go back out to the parks, go fishing and hiking, or if you're at the airport and you need a fast snack, that yes, we want to continue to put our messaging in front of people from that.
Yeah, I can offer a little bit of perspective because at Ground Truth, you can find this on our website, but we have a foot traffic tracker where we report, it's publicly available, foot traffic in a lot of different categories like retailers, restaurants, but even places like parks and beaches and things like that. And we just released something this week that we saw the highest foot traffic to sort of your more tourism-based beaches, amusement parks this past Saturday that we've seen since the pandemic began. So we're definitely seeing the data supporting that people are, I think, itching to go out and start to travel. And the good news is for some of your brands, we're also seeing the highest levels of retail traffic, foot traffic, over the last month that we've seen since prior to the pandemic. So
Yeah,
it's going to be an interesting trend to follow for sure as vaccinations roll out and things like that. It's something we're paying close attention to. But on that note, I have another question I just sort of thought of on this note, which is, obviously a huge shift to click and collect and online and over the last 12 months. But as sort of the world starts to open up, people feel more comfortable physically going places. What do you think, do you think you'll continue sort of the same investments that you've made online versus in store? Do you think that will maybe the pendulum will shift back a little bit once, we sort of get out of the woods, I guess, if you will?
yeah, I expect that our investment will continue in that space. Again, can you take with a grain of salt the research that says in the US from grocery and online grocery, those who started buying online will continue, and that number was somewhere in the 80%. So even if you scale that back and say it's 50, 60% or 40%, the truth is that the consumer has adopted new habits and the habits are going to stick at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And even if we move towards hybrid where gosh, I just feel like for some period of time I just want to get back in the store. I'm so tired of having 40 deliveries a week to my house. The pre-shop behavior back to the consumer and who the consumer is and how they're shopping still tell us that people are spending more time on a device before they order. They're ordering on a device more. That will not stop. Some of the larger retailers publish their numbers around those who have apps of the number of people that are on their app on their phone while they shop through the store, price comparisons, doing other. That just is an information point that tells us we need to continue to invest in that area. Now, I think what we suspect is we all probably overinvest in this area as we get in, we learn that consumer, we understand that behavior a little bit better. But yes, we will continue to make it a point of and a focus for investing for us.
Right. And kind of going back to the very first question, which is the journey still starts in a digital environment, right? And that's not going to change regardless of where they convert. So obviously you have to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. And again, something we're paying attention to in terms of sort of the in-store versus the online conversion, but regardless of where the conversion happens, you still have to engage with them in that environment.
Yeah. Definitely.
All right, there's one more question from the audience, and last call, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But how do you measure success for programs geared at reaching the consumer in these challenging times?
Yeah, so it really goes program by program as we think about that, because we still run a lot of different programs, right? So if you want to think about traditional shopper, yes, there's still in-store coupons, right? And we still are measuring those the same way that we have before. I think at the end of the day, we still have the metrics around the retailer and what we want to do with the retailer and what the KPIs are for that retailer program. We're learning more about digital and omni of what we consider success. So I think for like a lot of marketers, what you would hear us say is each program is going to have its own success metric based on what the intent is. And I'm trying to think of a really good case it's such a broad question, right? Of
Right.
how we reach across the consumer, but ultimately we've got the brand mandates, right? Everybody wants to increase household penetration, win new snacking occasions, and increase the numbers of buy per year. And so each one of those, as we think about from the brand mandates, has a very specific measurement that we want to have in place with the consumer. So I guess the better answer is, yes, we are thinking about measuring success. We do have specific KPIs, but it is really case specific as we think about that.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that some of the more traditional ways that you've measured success for many years in terms of household penetration and buy rate are still kind of at the end of the day, what matters and how you gauge the success of a brand, right?
Forever.
Regardless of how you're changing the ways in which you engage the consumer.
No doubt.
Pearl, hi, welcome back.
Great job, you
I'm
guys.
taking this as we must be at time.
It's a slow goodbye for now.
Music playing us off.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thanks so much for joining us. Huge fan of Jack Link's and your product. I wish you guys were bigger back when I was in elementary school, because I ate too many Slim Jims and I don't know what happens to my insides, but would have definitely loved if like Costco had a 100-pack of some Jack Link's instead.
We're here for you.
Yeah.
I'm curious,
Well,
remind me of the brand name of the product that your kid takes